All right, so I melted the lead out. There's no lead underneath. It's just right here and up in here, obviously. But in the video I posted yesterday, I showed this. This was really, really high, like it had a big kick up right here. So what I ended up doing was I took it was actually a Dremel attachment. It's the little tiny cutoff wheel. They have brown ones that explode and aren't worth a crap, but they have the black ones that are the mesh weaves looking like a real grinding disc. And anyway, I put the attachment in my drill, cordless drill, and then I went in there and I pretty much got it pretty good and scored, because it's a small diameter and you can get in there and cut before getting into the body. But anyway, I got it just about scored and then it broke. So what I ended up doing was I took a chisel, and it was already scored pretty good, so it didn't take much with a hammer just to go ahead and split it. And then at that point I used my punch and hammer and punched that down. And this was actually out a little bit right here, so I hammered this in a little bit. So now I'll pretty much go in here, and I'm kind of debating on going ahead and just putting a strip of sheet metal right here, because it has the indent right here where it kicks down, and then this is pretty high here, so this is all pretty low. So I'm thinking about cutting a piece of sheet metal that fits down in here, and it's basically just a spacer, and I'll drill a few holes in it for plug welds, and then I'll perimeter weld it. But that'll give a good enough rise to where it comes out even, and that way this is not full of filler. And with a flexible car, you know, it could crack out of there. So I think doing a piece of sheet metal is going to be the fastest, well, not fastest, but the best way of going about it. So that's probably what I'm going to do. This here, I now have it pretty even. So now it just kind of gradually rises up into the car instead of going and then dropping down to the rocker. Anyway, more metalwork. Yay! Alright guys, here we go. I hope the wind's not too bad. I tried setting the GoPro up on, you know, beside the quarter panel, because I got wind blowing this way. I don't have a microphone, I don't have wind socks, so you're just going to have to put up with it. Anyway, so what I've done is I've cut out a piece of poster board for the strip in here I'm going to fill to make this even. When I set this ruler up here, this metal ruler, that's a lot of slack, man. So I'm going to build a fill piece to put in there. So here we go. I used to have a little spring punch, a little handheld spring punch. You can get them at the hardware stores for like $5 to $10. Thing was like 10 years old, and it got to where it wouldn't work anymore. And I took it apart, stretched the spring out, and put it back in. It didn't fix it, so I just threw it away, and I never have got another one. I need to. Put me a couple little dents in there, so when I drill it, the drill bit doesn't walk around in a circle and irritate the crap out of me. So I'm going to drill 3 holes in here for plug welds. That way I have a full perimeter weld and plug welds, so I know that's strong and it ain't going to crack. So before I cut this strip out, I'm going to do all my prep on this first. Actually got that one a little too high. Alright, so when you drill a hole in sheet metal, you always get the kick out flash on the back side here. So what I like to do is I drill a little bit smaller hole than the end result hole that I want. So at that point I use cordless impact with the step bit on it, and I go in from the back side and I open it up one hole like that. And what that does is it cleans off the flash but it hits to the next one and it chamfers that a little bit. So instead of having just a straight cut drill hole, it's chamfered at the top for more weld to go into. So now at this point, I will cut it out. So this is what I like to use. You know, you could use 10 snips and go in here and cut this. Now I have 10 snips, but they're like probably older than I am. So all they ever do is put little, you know, they just make it not true. So every time I cut something out, I have to lay it down and hammer it flat. So I'll use this. It'll cut it really quick and get it over with. And now it's like 5,000 degrees and it'll burn your fingers, so probably ought to put my gloves on. So my seam split in my welding glove yesterday, and I got an ember down inside there because this was opened up because the stitches came out of it. There's more coming out right there. So I need to go get a new pair of welding gloves. You know what, I ought to close the garage door, jump in the truck, go across the street to Tractor Supply, get me a pair of gloves and a spring punch. Because I never ever think about that stuff. I have pretty much a one-track mind, and it's always on whatever car I'm working on. So if I don't make a list, I forget stuff. All right, so there's my filler piece right there. So now here's the thing on a 55 Chevy. The rocker is curved. It has a contour to it. 56 just pretty much goes down, and 57 as well. So you 56 and 7 owners are very lucky in that aspect of it. I got asked the other day what my favorite Tri-5 is, and I mean obviously it's 55s. And the reason is, I love them all. I've owned them all. I would take any of the three at any given time. I will say the most beautiful, like original Tri-5 to me, just me, 57's an American icon. Everybody even that doesn't even live in this country knows what a 57 Chevy looks like. But to me is a 56 Chevy Bel Air two-door hardtop. Because the two-tone paint line goes all the way up the fender and back inside the trim, and I think that's gorgeous. And I've always liked that. I want to say is it crocus yellow or something and black. It's kind of like a greenish color and black two-tone. That's my favorite. It's not necessarily yellow. It's more of a mint green look color. I'm not sure the exact color, but that is my favorite. Of original. If I had an original, that's what I would want. But anyway, back to this. So now I've got a contour here, and this is just a straight piece of metal, so I'm basically just going to stick it up there and push in on it. Get my curve, move it up a little bit. Alright, so now I have pretty much a curve in there to fit it in. So at this point it's pretty much ready, because this thing is so low. When you put that up there, it's amazing how low that is. This is always a bad spot in a 55. If you ever look at a lot of these cars at a show, and you really go and you look at the finish quality and the fit and all that, and you look down one, like get down and look down from the back or the front down this, you'll usually see 9 out of 10, you will see one of these that's kind of rippled out. So, and it's just, there's nothing the body guy could really do, because when the guys at GM put these together, they just, you know, it was good enough back then. And like this piece is actually angled out like this. This needs to be pushed in, which technically I could, because this is just open right here. I could split that right there and push that in a little bit and then re-weld it. But I don't think I'm going to go that far with it. Anyway, now on my hardtop, when I did mine, I cut every one of these flanges out in the entire car. Like the quarter panels, I put new quarters on it. But anyway, I cut every lead seam out of that car, and I butt welded in sheet metal. So everything is fully welded. It just, to me, lead, it always cracks, man, and I hate that stuff. I've also, if you go to a lot of car shows, you'll notice some cars that have lead which I've noticed a lot of them from the 60s, 70s, and early 80s, and I know some guys will tell you that, you know, like G-bodies didn't have lead. Well, that's a bunch of crap, because you would not believe how much of it I've melted out of G-bodies. They have both, and it probably depends on the year or where they were built. But anyway, you will notice bubbles everywhere a lead seam is in new paint. It just, I don't know what causes it. My version is that maybe, you know, after you clean all the paint off of something and ain't had air to it in so many years, you know, it gets contaminated. It draws stuff in, and maybe that's, you know, what causes the little lead bubbles. But that's why I like to remove it, because, you know, with the price of paint nowadays and supplies, by the time you paint a car, that's all you need is lead bubbles or a lead crack in the paint job. So another thing on these 55s, I will tell you a pretty good little tip. If you're going to be doing your own body work at home, which I will say, if you've never done body work, don't be afraid of it. You don't have to be a perfect body man. You just need to be able to block sand primer real good, because the primer will make it pretty much level. Like if you can't sand body filler very well, the primer will pretty much straighten it out if you use a good enough polyester filler primer. Now, here's something that happened to me several years back. I'm old school. I like sandpaper that has sticky back. Now, I do have an Air DA in there, and it takes hook and loop. My buffing pads are hook and loop. But as far as sandpaper sheets, like air file sheets, I like the peel and stick. The reason being, when you're blocking out a car, you might use something out of the garage off the shelf that has a contour that you need to use for a sanding block. It's not going to be hook and loop. So when I went to my local paint store a few years ago, when I walked in the door, there was quite a few guys in there, you know, all professional painters. And I gotta say, I might have been the oldest one that walked in there, actually. But anyway, I went in there to get some 80 grit air file sheets sticky back. Well, he was out, and they all just made it a big joke, and can't believe I'm still using sticky back, need to be using hook and loop. And I told him, you really, you know, when you're using sanding blocks of all, no matter what it is, like a hammerhead or whatever, you can't put hook and loop on it. They didn't care. They still thought it was funny, kind of made fun of me a little bit, and it pissed me off. So anyway, this is the reason why, especially if you're 55 owners and you got to do body work like I'm going to be doing. You think you can get muffler pipe that's hook and loop? I doubt it. Anyway, this is how I did the rockers on my 55, and that's how I got them perfectly straight from end to end. Got some peel and stick 80 on there, and had filler all over the whole thing, and pretty much went down the whole thing like that. Now when I'm doing that, you don't have to have 4-inch, you can use smaller. You just need something nice and straight that has a curve to it. That way, as you're going forward and back, you can twist it like this. All right, guys, my camera battery died. I was just talking away, doing that, and welding, and anyway, so I put that piece in, and I tacked and tacked and tacked and tacked and tacked. You know, after I plug welded them, but I was using these right here, and you know, basically clamping it on there. I made sure that this is completely flat against the body. Like, I didn't want to just stick it up there and start welding it, because if it has any space in behind it, it could cause an issue of, you know, body flex moving. You know, it might crack out later. So I made sure this was completely up against when I plug welded it. And then after this was all plug welded, I used a hammer and went around the edge of that just lightly, and you know, tapped that edge down, made sure that edge was all the way around. So anyway, now that I got it all welded, and I'll have to pretty much go in and do a bunch of grinding, but I still haven't got my stupid roll-lock discs in the mail yet. So getting pretty frustrated with that. I guess I'm gonna have to go in there and see what's going on with eBay.